Hello, BookTube. Well, earlier today I was ensconced in my book room at the Christian Science Monitor here in Boston, uh, oblivious to the rest of the world, having a ball. But I couldn't help but notice the relatively small size of the mountain of books waiting for me there to be dealt with. Uh, and I worried that it would redound to the home front, and it has. I have a book haul for you today. It's just one package. Very bad. Don't know what explains it. I would ordinarily blame myself and say, well, the open letters book requests have just fallen off. There must be a trough of some kind or other. But it happened at the Boston Globe and it happened at the Christian Science Monitor. So there's a trough, all right, but it's not just due to me. So I thought we would haul this book, whatever it is, and maybe haul the daylights out of it. Because it's the only one. So let's see what it is and give it a little extra attention. Feels like a paperback. So here's hoping that it's much later in the year. Oh no, okay, no, it's not much later in the year. It's a paperback release of an earlier hardcover, and it's called The Caped Crusade: Batman and the Rise of Nerd Culture. Take a look at that cover. I absolutely loved this book when it first came out, and apparently so did everybody else. Look at all these blurbs. Good Lord. Uh, uh, let's see here. Hailed as a roaring getaway car of guilty pleasures, The Caped Crusade is a fascinating, critically acclaimed chronicle of the rise and fall of one of the world's most iconic superheroes and the fans who love him. In The Caped Crusade, NPR pop culture correspondent Glenn Weldon gives readers the full backstory of the infamous Dark Knight, a fun cultural history that will appeal to comic nerds, blockbuster buffs alike. The book provides a fascinating analysis of the staying power, yet endless mutability, of Batman. Weldon writes with the intelligence of a seasoned journalist and the excitement of a lifelong fan as he traces the superhero's 78-year history and multitudinous iterations. And the paperback comes out next week. Okay, fantastic. I actually never wrote about this book. I never wrote about it for anybody else, and it was my colleague Justin Hickey at Open Letters that wrote about it for Open Letters Monthly. Did a fantastic job. Did a better job writing about it than any of the people blurbed on this sheet or on the book, which makes me a little curious why the folks at Simon & Schuster didn't blurb him on the book, but that's all right. Can't have everything. But I did read the book, and I thought it was fascinating. I've read it. It came out a couple of years after a similar book about Superman. I had problems with the some of the premise. One of the keys to the staying power of Batman is his refusal to be mutable. Aside from a few variations on the theme, that held for not very long, 10 years at a stretch, maybe 11 years at a stretch. Aside from those iterations of, sort of fun and happy Batman, a kind of goofy Batman who climbs giant kitchen appliances and fights aliens. Aside from that, and that didn't last very long, Batman has been remarkably similar in all of his iterations. I think that the comics fans have realized this is the guy they fell in love with. This is the guy who made them believe, despite everything that was happening to them at school, the wedgies, the wet willies, the dreaded rear admirals. Despite all of that, Batman told them it was cool to be a nerd. It was cool to read comics. And every one of those kids went on to become a comics creator. And Batman's legacy has always been in the hands, therefore, of people who seriously revered his cool factor, except for the second generation of his creators, which did not grow up with him and had no reverence for the character. And that's where you got that period where Batman was goofy and avuncular, because those people didn't get him. Every other group of creators grew up with the Dark Knight, the somber, grim hero, and if that was ever in any danger of evaporating again, Frank Miller's Dark Knight Returns nailed it in place forever. Which is why I believe that every time DC Comics has a continuity-wide revamp where they redo their characters, they redo all sorts of origin stories. Batman is always the character who survives virtually untouched. Now, part of that is money, because the comic books are owned by multinational conglomerates that own and make the movies that make mints of money. So, the part of that is, I'm sure, a directive from on high. Don't change this character. Don't make him gay. Don't change his costume. Don't change his motivations. Don't do anything to confuse the movie-going audience. But most of it is just the creators realizing that if it's not broke, don't fix it. And the Trinity, the so-called Trinity of DC Comics, Superman, Wonder Woman, and Batman, aren't broke. Which only confuses me more why DC would consider changing them at all. And yet, Superman has changed on a fairly regular basis, and Wonder Woman has changed virtually every week. Batman, though, much tougher. much tougher. Usually, even when there's a soup to nuts revamping of the whole thing, of the whole DC continuity, which actually happened 5 or 6 years ago, usually Batman will remain untouched, and that's a good thing. Oh wow! Look at that. This has lots and lots of black and white illustrations. Great, fantastic. Let me see here. Let's see if I can. Well, you've got a black and white still from Batman Year One, which is great. You've got a black and white still from Batman Dark Knight Returns, which is great. And you've got a still from Death in the Family. The infamous Batman storyline, and the most cynical thing I've ever seen in comic books, where the writer of the comic got permission from his bosses at DC Comics to float to fans the possibility that the Joker would kill Robin the Boy Wonder, and then left it up to them. They got 2 phone numbers to call. Call this one to vote to save him. Call this one to vote to kill him. And the fans actually voted to kill him. This wasn't Dick Grayson. This wasn't the original Batman. This was an extremely annoying Jason Todd. I'm still not sure, no matter how annoying a 10-year-old is, I'm still not sure that it's provocation for voting to have the Joker beat him to death with a crowbar. But nevertheless, the fans voted against him living. And the writer and the artist had both issues prepared. And that's the one they ran, where the Joker kills Robin in the most visceral and direct and unheroic way imaginable. It's not ambiguous like an explosion or a drowning. He beats him to death with a crowbar. Not only the most cynical point that I've ever seen in comics, but also, in my opinion, one of the lowest points in comics. Just, if you're the creator, create. Don't leave it up to a phone call. It's not a vox populi type thing. It ended up not mattering anyway, because Jason Todd, like everybody else, comes back from the dead. Once upon a time, there was an ironclad rule in comics: nobody dies but Bucky. And that rule referred to Captain America's World War II kid sidekick, Bucky, who dies in the explosion that sends Captain America into suspended animation, from which he only later revives in the present day. Bucky never returns. For decades and decades and decades, that was the rule. That in comics, nobody dies except Bucky. So no matter who, no matter what, no matter how it looks, they live. And you would think that a comic that shows Robin being beaten to death with a crowbar would break that rule. Surely that character could not return from the dead, but he did. And not only that, but the rule no longer exists because Bucky came back from the dead, as you all know, since you watched the Marvel Comics movies. But anyway, so that is our book for today. It feels really bad to say that in the singular, but the Caped Crusade, I highly recommend it. You comics fans absolutely have to have it. It's an absolute hoot. And it joins. There was a Superman volume that was very much like this that came out a couple of years, or maybe 10 years ago now. And of course, Jill Lepore just recently, a couple of years ago, had her version of this kind of book with Wonder Woman, and this book really joins them. So there's a very small shelf of non-comic book books, books about comic books that comic book fans really have to have. and this is one of them. So I highly recommend it, and it's now out in paperback, or will be soon. And that is that is it. I'll see you soon, BookTube, with more, I hope.